November 7, 1944. On the calendar of the Red Army, the 27th anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution. In the city of Niš, Serbia, newly liberated from German occupation, the mood was one of cautious celebration. The Soviet 6th Guards Rifle Corps was on the move, marching from Niš toward Belgrade, believing the skies belonged to them. They were wrong. At 12:50 p.m., the low twin-engine hum of approaching aircraft cut through the celebratory atmosphere. To the Soviet troops on the ground, the silhouette was unfamiliar, but the threat was immediate. They were not Luftwaffe Junkers or Messerschmitts, but they were diving all the same. In seconds, the road to Belgrade evaporated in a hail of 20mm cannon fire. The irony was absolute. On the day celebrating their revolution, Soviet soldiers were about to die by the hands of their American allies. The architects of this disaster were the pilots of the US 82nd Fighter Group, stationed out of Foggia, Italy. Their briefing that morning had been routine, hunt retreating German motorized columns in the Ibar Valley. But the geography of the Balkans is treacherous. Colonel Clarence Edwinson, leading the formation, had drifted nearly 60 miles off course. Through the haze, he spotted a massive convoy of trucks and armor moving along the Morava River. In the adrenaline of the cockpit, confirmation bias took hold. The navigational maps claimed no Allied troops were within 100 miles of this sector. To Edwinson and his pilots, the column below could only be the Wehrmacht. There was no radio check with Soviet liaison officers. There was no hesitation. The order was given, and the fork-tailed devils rolled in to strike. The first strafing run was surgically effective. The P-38s, armed with 4 50-caliber machine guns and a 20mm Hispano cannon in the nose, shredded the soft-skinned Soviet transport trucks. The convoy had no heavy anti-aircraft cover, only light arms. In the command vehicle sat Lieutenant General Grigory Kotov, a hardened veteran and commander of the Corps. As the American fighters made their second pass, strafing the lead vehicles to create a bottleneck, General Kotov was struck. He was killed instantly, the highest-ranking casualty of the entire incident. On the ground, confusion reigned. Soviet troops waved red banners, fired red flares, the universal signal for friendly forces. But at 300 miles per hour, the American pilots saw only muzzle flashes. They interpreted the desperate signaling as enemy return fire and pressed the attack. Just miles away at the Niš airfield, the sound of the massacre reached the Soviet 866th Fighter Aviation Regiment. The pilots on alert duty were stunned. They could see the twin-boomed aircraft diving on their comrades. Initially, they identified the attackers as Focke-Wulf 189 Uhu reconnaissance planes, a German aircraft with a similar twin-tail silhouette. The order to scramble was immediate. 9 Yakolev Yak-9 fighters roared down the runway, engines screaming against the cold November air. Among them were Lieutenants Shipulya and Krivonogich. They were not taking off to intercept a raid. They were taking off to avenge a massacre. They climbed steeply, retracting gear, and armed their cannons, unaware they were about to engage the United States Army Air Force. The engagement that followed was the only direct aerial combat between the U.S. and the USSR in the Second World War. The P-38 Lightning relied on energy tactics, dive, fire, climb. The Soviet Yak-9 was a low-altitude dogfighter, nimble and dangerous in a turn. The Americans, realizing they were under attack, finally broke off their strafing run to engage the new aerial threat. They still believed these were German planes. The fight was brutal and vertical. Lieutenant Shipulya, aggressive in his defense, was hit almost immediately by a concentrated burst of .5 caliber fire. His Yak disintegrated. Another Soviet pilot, Lieutenant Krivonogik, managed to damage an American plane but was soon overwhelmed by the superior numbers of the 82nd Fighter Group. His aircraft plummeted into the hills surrounding Niš. The friendly skies had turned into a slaughterhouse. In the chaos, the visual identification marks were lost in the speed of the merge. The American white star in a blue circle and the Soviet red star were distinct on paper, but at combat speeds, obscured by smoke and adrenaline, they were invisible. It took a moment of extreme risk to break the deadlock. Captain Alexander Konov, a Soviet ace, realized the performance of the enemy aircraft didn't match the Luftwaffe. These planes were too fast, too heavy. He pushed his Yak-3 to its limit, climbing vertically to pull alongside the lead American element. He didn't fire. Instead, he rocked his wings violently, exposing the large red stars emblazoned on his fuselage and wings. He banked sharply, essentially offering himself as a target to prove his identity. Colonel Edwinson, seeing the red star flash past his canopy, felt the blood drain from his face. The realization hit with the force of a physical blow. He immediately radioed the squadron, "Stop shooting! They are ours!" The chatter on the American radio frequency turned from tactical commands to horrified expletives. The P-38s, some trailing smoke, others low on ammunition, broke formation and climbed rapidly to the west, retreating toward the safety of the Italian coast. Below them, they left a landscape of burning trucks and a furious ally. The dogfight had lasted only 15 minutes, but the damage to the Grand Alliance was done. The Americans turned for home, terrified not of the enemy, but of the report they would have to file upon landing. The smoke cleared over Niš, revealing the grim arithmetic of the error. On the ground, 34 Soviet soldiers lay dead, including Lieutenant General Kotov. Another 39 were wounded, their bodies scattered among the charred skeletons of the convoy. In the air, the toll was equally controversial. The official Soviet count claimed they had shot down 3 American P-38s while losing 3 of their own Yaks. The American after-action reports admitted to losing 2 aircraft but claimed to have destroyed 4 unidentified fighters. Regardless of the numbers, the loss of life was senseless. American pilots, expecting Iron Crosses, had instead killed the very men they were supposed to be supporting. The bodies were gathered, and the wreckage of the American planes was quickly covered by Soviet intelligence officers. The diplomatic fallout was immediate and nuclear. When the report reached Moscow, Stalin was apoplectic. The U.S. ambassador, Averell Harriman, was forced to rush to the Kremlin with a formal apology from President Franklin D. Roosevelt. To prevent the incident from shattering the alliance right before the final push into Germany, both sides agreed to bury the story. The pilots of the 82nd Fighter Group were ordered never to speak of the engagement. The Soviet witnesses were silenced by the Commissariat for Internal Affairs. The Niš Incident became a ghost story of the war, classified top secret and hidden in the archives of the Pentagon and the Kremlin for decades. It stands today not just as a tragedy of friendly fire, but as a chilling preview of the Cold War, American and Soviet machines locking horns over the skies of Eastern Europe.